My fiance left me alone in the woods. I have been with my fiance for 6 years. I am 26 and he is 32. He has always had a short temper and often picks arguments over small things, but he's so very kind. Every other time that I have looked past it and maybe hoped to help him chill out, he's funny and I really do love him. I do my best to avoid arguments, but sometimes it's impossible. I remember feeling so happy and content because we hadn't argued in several days and he had been in a good mood. We began to leave and started heading home, still in good spirits. The beach was located in a remote area, and neither of us had good cell phone signal to use GPS to leave. He began to yell and take his anger out on the steering wheel, and I instantly felt defensive. Like every happy moment of the day was crumbling right there because usually once his behavior starts, the day is ruined. I made the mistake of yelling back at him and that he needs to chill out, quit making everything such a huge deal. I regret this, but I just felt so overwhelmed. I just wanted the good vibes to continue, you know? We argued back and forth for a few moments before he angrily pulled the truck to a small paved parking lot where people usually stop to rest or grill food. He screamed at me to get out, and like an idiot, I did, and he left me there. I sat in the bush and cried for a few minutes before a man approached me and started asking kind of uncomfortable questions about where I was from, who I was with, why we were there. I tried to be friendly in the hopes my fiance would return soon, but the stranger started touching my hands and offered me a ride home, and it made me scared, so I lied and said I had to go meet my boyfriend at a spot nearby and walked down the road quickly. I made it about a quarter of a mile away before I sat by a little pond where some people were fishing. I had no cell phone signal to call anyone to get me, and I was scared to ask for help, so I just sat there and tried not to panic for almost 3 hours. He left you there for 3 hours? I was alone the majority of the time, as when I arrived, the only people around were people packed and ready to leave. From 4 to 6:30 p.m., I was left alone in the forest until I was able to find cell phone service after wandering for a bit and called my fiance's mom to come get me. It is now almost 8 p.m. and I am extremely sunburned and thirsty, but I finally walked far enough to get signal to call his mom for help. I haven't spoken to him yet, but he has sent several messages basically just asking where I was and complaining that I had his wallet in my purse. I'm still waiting for my ride to get here, still very lost and upset. I feel so hurt and betrayed and as if this was a huge overreaction on his end, but I do love him and if it's my fault, I want to know. It was such a scary experience, which is why I feel it was too much. It is not normal for anyone, let alone someone who's supposed to be the love of your life, to leave you stranded in a forest to fend for yourself. Ever. Okay, so she has a small little update. I am currently safe and staying the night with my mom. After my fiance and his mom finally found me after a stranger noticed me on the side of the road and drove me around the park for 15 minutes looking for them. They both started in at me that this was all my fault because I should have just refused to get out of the car to begin with. I realize that is what logic would tell you to do, but it's hard to be logical when you are upset, tipsy, and being screamed at. He also claimed that he looked for me for almost 2 hours before leaving to rally help and looking. His mom swears up and down he's telling the truth too, but I don't believe it. I sat in the spot he left me for at least 30 minutes before I was scared off by a stranger, and then I sat in a very visible, heavily trafficked area next to a creek that was maybe a quarter mile from where I started with no visual barriers whatsoever. I never saw or heard him drive by once. I remember listening closely for him because his truck is loud and I would have heard it coming. I can see now that he has put me in grave danger. He has still not apologized, but I don't expect him to because he thinks he is in the right in this. I'm going to try and remove him from my life and spend some time alone. I will admit that in my quest for love and closeness, I have let him and other men treat me less than great just to keep them around. Thank you all again for helping me understand what a doormat I've been. I'm trying to force this man to love me when I have forgotten to love myself. Okay, I'm glad that she realized that she was in an abusive relationship and has decided to leave, but oh my God, the gaslighting, the red flags, it's unbelievable.
Am I wrong for freaking out when my wife locked our son out of the house at night after he drank alcohol? I, male 39, have a 16-year-old son with my wife, female 40. This incident happened a few days ago and she's still mad at me. I was on a work trip, so my wife was at home with our son. When I got back, I found out that he'd been hanging out with his friends and they convinced him to drink some beer and he got a little drunk. I'm not saying that what he did was right, but him and I had a talk about it and it's fine. The problem is that when he came home and my wife found out, she was furious and kicked him out. She then refused to let him back in until the morning and he was begging her to let him in, but she wouldn't. So when I found out, I'm not gonna lie, I was furious. Regardless of what he did, she made a slightly drunk teenager stay outside by himself that night, and something very bad could have happened. This led to a really big argument between me and my wife, and I asked her how the hell she thought that was okay. I do agree leaving him outside was just way too much. Am I wrong for freaking out when my wife locked our son out of our house at night after he drank alcohol? When she came home and my wife found out, she was furious and kicked him out and refused to let him back in until the morning. He was literally begging her to let him in, but she wouldn't. And I'm not gonna lie, when I found out, I was furious. Because regardless of what he did, she made a slightly drunk teenager stay outside by himself at night, and something very bad could have happened to him. This led to a huge argument over it, and I asked her how the hell she thought that was okay. But she just kept saying that it's our son's fault for drinking alcohol. My wife really isn't talking to me now, and my son isn't talking to his mom. I do feel I'm in the right, but maybe I'm not. Am I wrong? If you guys don't think he's wrong, I seriously recommend you to read the actual Reddit post and the comments under it, where they reference so many cases where this goes completely wrong. And my heart goes out to them. Home is supposed to be the safe place, no matter what.
Hi, welcome back. Am I wrong for interrupting my son's date so that he could pick up his little sister? I am a single father, 43 male to 2 children, Max 17 male and Liza 8 female. I usually have Liza in after school club so that I'm able to pick her up after work. However, last evening I was given some work that had me working overtime. I did try my best to negotiate out of it, but my manager told me that the assignment was to be completed by that night, so I just did it. It was nearing towards 6 p.m. and I just knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Liza, so I called Max and asked him to pick her up. He responded by saying he couldn't because he was on a date with his girlfriend for their 6-month anniversary. I told him that I understood, but that I really needed him to get Liza and that I'd make it up to him for interrupting. He just angrily turned off the phone, and I thought that while he was mad at me, he just decided to pick her up. 30 minutes later, I received a call from the school on where I was because the school was close to closing down and no one was there. Luckily, one of Liza's friend's mothers said they dropped her off and that was all good. However, I don't really like it when Liza goes with that particular friend, not because of the friend, but because of the mother. She has this habit of asking math questions in the car that she knows Liza is unable to answer and then criticizes her over it. It's all just very mean. I called Max and asked him where he was and that he was in big trouble when he got home. He just told me that he was busy and to leave him the hell alone. He came home around 9 p.m. I told him he was grounded and that he was not allowed to use the car for a good 3 weeks. At that, he got all mad and said that it wasn't his fault that I was failing as a parent and unable to afford someone to collect Liza. This is the 3rd time I've ever asked Max to pick up his sister in the span of a year and a half. Some people are asking why I don't have a nanny. Money is tight. Max and Liza's mother is not present in their lives, and no, I did not think of socializing myself with the parents at Liza's school. I'm at work most times, so I haven't found time outside of the yearly parent meetings. Just want some insight on the situation. Was I being too harsh, and am I the asshole for interrupting his date? Slow it down, make it bouncy.
Am I wrong for initially not believing my son when he said he was sick? I'm a 48-year-old single mom to 2 kids. We'll call them Rachel and Vic. Rachel recently turned 18 and she has a lot of chronic health issues that she's been struggling with since she was little. We've been blessed that she has a lot of good periods, but right now she's having some trouble, likely due to the stress of next year's graduation and all that entails. Needless to say, I've been kept pretty busy making sure she stays as healthy as possible, and I think Vic has always resented the extra attention his sister receives, which is understandable. I've always tried my best to make sure he also has special time devoted to him too, but I'd be lying if I said Rachel's health hasn't taken precedence. About a month ago, we had the good news that Vic will likely be graduating early due to academic excellence. I was so happy and congratulated him, but I noticed that since then his behavior seemed to be worse. He was more moody, short with me, and not eating the meals that I made. Am I wrong for initially not believing my son when he said he was sick? He was acting super moody, being short with me, and not eating the meals I made. Last week, I took Rachel to the doctors over a sinus issue, and while we were there, Vic called. He called from school saying he was in a lot of pain and could I take him home early. I told him he knew I was at the doctor with Rachel and he got all pissy and said some not so nice things about me favoring her. I'll admit I jumped to conclusion and figured he was just trying to get attention since his early graduation news hadn't given him enough. So I told him that because of his bad attitude, I wouldn't be picking him up at all. When I got home, everything seemed normal, but when I called the kids down for dinner, Vic did not come. And when I checked his room, I quickly realized he was genuinely sick. I immediately rushed him to the doctor and apologized profusely for not believing him. I tried explaining where I was coming from, but he said if I was Rachel, I wouldn't have made that assumption. And since then, he hasn't really talked to me. Am I wrong for telling my sister-in-law that she's freaking annoying? She did not say freaking, y'all, but we're just gonna leave it at that. So my sister-in-law's been staying with my husband and I for the past month after being evicted. She says they sold the building she was living in, and I have no reason to not believe her. She works nights and my husband and I work days, and we also have a son with ADHD. He's currently unmedicated because they haven't completely finished the evaluation. So my sister-in-law sleeps from 6 a.m. when she gets home until 2 to 4 p.m. That's around the time my husband and I pick up our son from daycare and get home from work. But my sister-in-law's the type that needs to make comments about everything. But it's not in the typical I'm trying to start a conversation sense. She just constantly repeats what she saw or heard. So every day she'll come downstairs and say something like, I just woke up and came down here and you are with Christopher and he's in a bad mood and I don't know why. Christopher is our son. Or I just went to make coffee and noticed there's no cups.